Transformers were a total slight against God, inasmuch as God sent his only begotten Son to die on the cross to redeem mankind, and all we did to pay him back was make terrible fucking movies like the Transformers.
Why does Michael Bay get to keep on making movies? I guess Pearl Harbor sucked.
What's up, Cracker?
I like Michael Bay's Transformers movies. Yeah, I imagine it's a bit of a shock to hear because of how universally hated these movies are, but honestly, I don't mind them. Don't get me wrong, they're not perfect, and they have a lot of things wrong with them. But I'm not gonna lie and say I don't find them entertaining as hell. But I must be upfront and admit that I have no connection to the original Transformers cartoons. I don't have a nostalgic connection or know anything about the source material, and that's probably why I'm able to watch these movies and just see them as stupid, mindless fun. I find Michael Bay to be a very interesting filmmaker. For a guy who seems to be labeled as the worst director of all time, he sure does seem to get consistent work, so he must be doing something right. I find his style to be loud, flashy, in your face, and stupid fun. Think of it as a teenager jacked up on Mountain Dew and Red Bull, just showing you a bunch of shit that he thinks would be cool on screen. So you get these epic slow-mo shots, lots of action, crude, awkward, and sexual humor, babes, and explosions. Lots of explosions. That's why I got some respect for this guy. He just goes, fuck it, here's what I want to see. And he doesn't really seem to care what others have to say about it. You either love it or hate it. And these movies are basically the prime example of Bay's style. You can find all the stuff he's known for in these movies. Like the stuff already listed with the humor, the explosions, the hot chicks, the super slow-mo, the low angles, the shaky cam, but you also get the bright oversaturated aesthetic with that lens flare. It's all here. For how juvenile these movies come across at times, I still find them to be a relatively fun watch. And sure, Michael Bay's style isn't the most highbrow, artsy, or even the best, and clearly not for everyone, but for me, I think it's pretty entertaining. I see it kind of like fast food or junk food. Yeah, T-bone steak is really good, but sometimes you just want a Big Mac with a side of 10-piece chicken nuggets. A side note, I think it's funny that for how hated these movies are, they make a lot of money. It's weird seeing something so unanimously hated by fans, critics, and general audiences, but yet it still is seen by so many people. I always thought that was very interesting. Anyway, since I got all of them on Blu-ray a while ago, including Bumblebee, I figured it was time to talk about them all. So join me as I talk about and then rank each Transformers movie. Transformers, released in 2007, starring Shia LaBeouf and Megan Fox, and of course directed by Michael Bay, and was the first live-action adaptation of the cartoon from the 80s and 90s. Now, for starters, I want to mention that when I look at a movie that's been out for as long as this one has, or longer, I try not to harp on the CGI, and try to rate it to the time period when it came out. At most, I would usually just mention that the CGI didn't age well, or isn't the best by today's standard. Today, though, I'm going to be doing the opposite, and take a moment to say that this movie's special effects are top-notch. I'm serious, this CGI is solid, and 14 years later, it still looks pretty good. And that goes for all these movies, really. You can say a lot of things about them, but you can't say that CGI is bad or cheap. Another thing I thought was pretty neat was how many practical effects were used, and how they added CGI characters in afterwards. Like all these cars are on wires and getting yanked across the street. Same with this highway scene. These are stunt drivers and wires are doing all this stuff, with the CGI character added in later. They use this blend of practical and CGI effects throughout all these movies. Well, mainly in the first three. And I thought it was worth mentioning because it's impressive how they combined them. Anyway, I just wanted to mention that because I was surprised with how well it all held up. So the story follows Sam Witwicky, played by Shia LaBeouf, a high schooler who gets his first car that turns out to be an alien space robot, known as an Autobot. He then learns that they are looking for a device called the Allspark, and they need to get to it before the rivals, the Decepticons, do, or else mankind will be wiped out. Now when I was rewatching this, I forgot how weird the first half is. It's like part of it's a war movie over in the Middle East, focusing on the soldiers fighting the Decepticons, and the other part is Sam being an awkward high school teen. And sandwiched in between this is this blonde chick who's a computer analyst.
Shut up, Grandma!
Their three stories eventually come together at the halfway point, but it's very weird to go from an intense battle in the desert to an awkward teen romance. Just think it's funny and strange how it bounces around. I think it bounces all decently well. It's not the best told story, but it's coherent enough that you kind of get what's going on, even though it's kind of all over the place. Now Shia LaBeouf is such a spaz, he's loud, he's an awkward guy, and I love it. Yeah, he's yelling a lot, and that gets annoying, but I kind of get a kick out of watching him speak a mile a minute, and seeing him frantically run around trying to explain things. I seriously can't help but crack a smile and sometimes cringe from the random shit that's coming out of his mouth.
Sir, just ask yourself, what would Jesus do?
Also, Megan Fox is here to be the hot love interest, but I will give credit where it's due. She isn't a damsel in distress, and she actually has a set of skills that Sam doesn't have, and she can take care of herself, although she isn't given much to do. During the third act, she just kind of helps out a bunch of soldiers, and that's pretty cool, but it doesn't really affect the final battle. Now, all the other characters are basically just okay or forgettable. No one else really stood out to me except for Simmons. He's actually hilarious and fucking bizarre. He's so weird, and I love it. I think he's funny as hell, although a little creepy at times.
He's a criminal. Criminals are hot. Hey, yo, what the fuck?
The human characters are whatever, but what people really care about are the Transformers. And I will say, Optimus Prime is pretty good, and so is Bumblebee. But I really don't remember much about the other ones. I remember there's one who likes guns, one's a medic, and one that's basically a stereotype.
What's cracking, little bitches? Designation Jazz. This looks like a cool place to kick it.
To be fair, it's a Michael Bay film, so there's a bunch of exaggerated stereotypes. And I feel the same way about the Decepticons. I know who Megatron is, but he doesn't come around until the third act. So you have these other Decepticons who you really don't know or learn much about. And they're just kind of there and you know they're bad. And like I already mentioned, the CGI looks pretty good, although I have to admit, at times when they're fighting each other, it's really hard to see exactly what's happening. And the camera either keeps cutting away from the fights, or they're super close up to it. So that's a bit annoying, but I find the action overall to be entertaining, because there are some awesome set pieces. Another thing that makes this movie feel so strange is the product placement. Usually I don't care, but Bumblebee turns into that year's latest Camaro, and the reveal looks like a commercial for it. And there's a moment where an Xbox 360 and a Mountain Dew machine come to life and start attacking people. It's the strangest product placement I've ever seen, but you know what? I dig it. It's creative and funny as hell. Something else that I enjoy that these movies do is tie into real world events and locations and add Transformer lore around them. Like how the Hoover Dam was there to hide the Allspark energy, and by studying Megatron, it helped him invent microchips and other technology the world uses. Stuff like that is really cool, and I like how these movies do that. And on a side note, I absolutely love the scene with Bernie Mac.
Oh, don't be like that. If I had a rock, I'll bust your head, bitch. Say, man, she deaf, you know?
Rest easy, you legend. This is usually the part where I tell you the things that I didn't like, but honestly, there really isn't anything. It's kind of like, I acknowledge that the story is dumb, the characters say and do really weird things, and don't have much depth to them. It's not well written, the jokes are weird, and the action is big, dumb, and loud, but I really don't care. It kind of adds to the experience as a silly popcorn flick. This movie is a lot of things, but boring isn't one of them. I was entertained throughout, and for all the dumb jokes, goofy characters, and explosions, I really did enjoy my time with this movie. In the end, Transformers was a huge success, breaking in over $700 million, with mixed but mostly positive reviews. Needless to say, this was a strong start, and a sequel was quickly underway. 2 years later, Revenge of the Fallen hit theaters, and oh man, this movie received some terrible reviews from both fans and critics, and many still consider this the worst Transformers film. But despite that, it brought in more money than the first, with over $800 million this time. So we continue the story of Sam Witwicky, but now he's heading to college, and the Autobots are working with the humans and taking out the Decepticons that keep coming to Earth. They then learn that Megatron and the other Decepticons are working for a new threat, called the Fallen. And what follows is Sam, his girlfriend, and friends traveling around the world trying to find a way to stop the Fallen from destroying the Earth. You know, same shit, different toilet. Now the way I see the first is a mostly fun but dumb movie, but Revenge of the Fallen is the first one that is so bad it's kinda good. At least for me anyway. Basically it's like they doubled down on everything that people didn't like from the first, which made it unbearable to watch. Shia LaBeouf is even louder and more of a spaz here, the crude sexual jokes are cranked up to 11, and everyone is just annoying or dumb as hell. And I could look past most of that if this movie wasn't so long. It's 2.5 hours long, and there's so many things that could have been cut out to save time. Like the mother tripping on brownies, and all these unnecessary moments of loud yelling and banter from characters that are supposed to be jokes but are more annoying. And you could cut out all this stuff with the parents getting kidnapped and used for bait later, because with the way it plays out, it doesn't really impact or change anything. So you can cut that out and it's the same. Basically it feels about 15 to 20 minutes longer than it should be. And if it were right around 2 hours, then it wouldn't feel like such a pain to get through at times. But on the flip side, it doubled down on things that I really liked from the first. For example, we see the Transformers talk and interact much more. Hell, they actually use their names so I can learn who's who. And the fights are pretty awesome. They're bigger and there's much more of them. I also really like the new Autobots and Decepticons, and I really like learning more about the lore and history of the Transformers. And I'm not gonna lie, there are a few times I find some of the jokes actually funny, just because the characters are so ridiculous. But overall, I see why this one is most people's least favorite. It's like they took the jokes, the humor, and cringe from the first and just amplified it. So now for every awesome moment, there's at least 1 or 2 moments that you really don't care for. But when I was rewatching it, there were several times I just threw my hands up and shook my head in confusion. So for me, it's kinda so bad it's good. Transformers Dark of the Moon, released in 2011, is the third film and was the last one starring Shia LaBeouf. And these first 3 films are known as the LaBeouf trilogy, or at least that's what I call it. And this was the first in the franchise to break $1 billion at the box office. So we again follow Sam Witwicky as he feels lost and kinda like a loser now that he's not involved with the Autobot stuff. He's living in DC now with his new girlfriend and looking for a job and trying to adjust to normal life. But of course, he's thrust back into some world-ending event with Autobots, Decepticons, and a secret conspiracy involving the dark side of the moon. So I'm a little mixed on this one because the second half of this movie is pretty awesome. The last hour or so when all the world-ending stuff is happening, it's pretty epic and badass. And they pull back on the crude and weird humor from the second film. I mean, it's still here, I'm just saying it's not as bad. And there are some really great action scenes and some awesome moments. And I was really just having a blast watching it. So the second half of the movie, I'm all for it. Shit's fun as hell. But the first part is the main issue. It focuses on stuff like Sam looking for a job, working at his job, seeing him meet the president, seeing how he met his new girlfriend, catching up with his parents. Stuff that really doesn't interest me that much. Although the whole conspiracy and secret about the dark side of the moon and Sentinel Prime is much more interesting, and I enjoyed seeing that stuff. I also thought it was cool seeing Sam struggle with wanting to matter again. Those are the things in the first half that I really liked. And then for the last hour, it's a giant battle in Chicago, and it's awesome. Also, I didn't care for Sam's new relationship, would just rather him be single. Just gotta tweak a few things and the movie could still work. There are some funny moments in the first half that really made me laugh.
I'm Wang. Deep Wang. Deep Wang. You're not getting it.
I don't know why it's so funny to me. But similar to the previous two movies, there's just so much stuff that isn't necessary that inflates the runtime. Honestly, that really applies to all these movies. But I didn't feel like this one ever got unbearable to watch. It was silly at times, but they reeled it back a bit. And even though the first part has a lot of shortcomings, I really do think the second half makes up for it. I just really like the climax in this movie. It's big, it's epic, and it's a whole lot of fun. So this was the first film not to include Megan Fox, and the last was Shia LaBeouf. Overall, I had a lot of fun with this one. And honestly, it felt like a pretty good conclusion to a very weird trilogy. But as we all know, this didn't stay a trilogy for long. 3 years after the LaBeouf trilogy concluded, a fourth installment released with Mark Wahlberg as the lead. Now with a new cast of characters, we're joined with his daughter and her boyfriend. We were also treated to some new Autobots as well, with Optimus Prime and Bumblebee being the only returning characters, with some slick new redesigns. Now, I was looking forward to this movie because Dark of the Moon felt like a solid ending, but after hearing about the premise, I was definitely intrigued. So it's been 5 years since the Chicago event, and the government has cut ties with the Autobots. They are now hunting down all the Transformers. So Optimus Prime and the other Autobots are in hiding, while the government, along with this space bounty hunter, track down and eliminate each one of them. After hearing that, I was hooked. Thought that was an interesting direction to take it, and after watching it, I can safely say that this one is probably my least favorite. So for starters, I found the main characters boring as hell. Say what you will about the characters from the LaBeouf trilogy, but at least they were entertaining, even though they were spouting out some weird ass dialogue. Here, all the human characters are mostly boring. Although I did like the billionaire tech guy. I thought he was pretty good. And I feel the same way about the new Autobots. They aren't really that special, although I do like that they're not all obnoxious and cracking stupid jokes all the time. Although they are pretty dull. Optimus and Bumblebee are the only good characters in this movie really, along with the bounty hunter. I thought he was kind of cool. So I'm not invested or even interested in the human characters. So when they're going through their shit on screen, I really didn't care. There are things that I do like though. In typical Michael Bay fashion, I found the third act and the climax to be a blast. Beijing is getting its shit pushed in, Autobots and these new Transformers made by the tech company are destroying each other, and Prime releases some legendary warriors that turn into these dinosaurs to help them in battle. And the final fight with the bounty hunter was pretty good. This whole last hour is fun, I gotta admit. But of course, the stuff before this just is not as interesting. Although with this movie, I found the first 30 minutes were pretty solid. It's really the second act where things start to get dragged out, and they feel like they go on forever. It happens when they enter the KSI building, all the way up until they escape the spaceship. That whole section just feels like a slog, especially that spaceship section. Although I do like that they finally shoot these robot fights better. The camera isn't as close, and when something cool happens, they slow it down so you can take it all in. Usually just for a few seconds so you don't miss anything. And with the redesigns looking sleeker, I found it easier to tell what's happening. So the robot fights look better here, in the sense that you can actually see it clearer. So I found the premise interesting, and I like the direction they took it, and I found parts of the story really cool too, like the bounty hunter and the mystery of who created the Transformers, and the billionaire making his own Transformers. That stuff was good. But of course, that's all drawn out and spliced in with some boring human characters, really making this one feel like a drag. This was the first movie in the franchise where I really felt the runtime. With the ones before it, I did think they were too long, but at least there was enough funny or weird shit there to keep me entertained. Here, that's not the case. Now, despite the quality, this was the second film in the franchise to break $1 billion. That's actually kind of crazy if you think about it. But I'm not gonna lie, I did like the ending where Optimus flies off Earth in search of his creators. I really wanted to see who they were and why they created the Transformers. So that did pique my interest for the next movie. And 3 years later, we got it. And oh man, it was something. The Last Knight hit theaters in 2017 and is actually the lowest grossing film in the franchise. I guess people started to catch on. So after the events of the previous movie, all Transformers are considered illegal and are being held captive and taken out by the government. No salvaging them for parts, no trying to learn to use their tech, they're just getting taken out. But more importantly, Transformers keep coming to Earth and they don't know why. And some of them are just fighting each other out in the open since they have no leader. Meanwhile, Mark Wahlberg is hiding as a fugitive, helping keeping Transformers safe and repairing the ones that were attacked by humans. And Optimus Prime returns to Cybertron to confront his creator. And then we learn about the history history of King Arthur and how the Transformers were involved. Oh yeah, Megatron is here too and he's kinda doing shit. So this movie has a lot going on. Now some argue that this is actually worse than Age of Extinction. I disagree. What this movie did was add back in more Michael Bay-isms. I'm talking about the crude and stupid dumb humor that just makes you cringe. Age of Extinction didn't have as much as this as the LaBeouf trilogy, and as a result it made the human characters completely boring. And if I'm being honest, I would rather the characters be awkward and weird with laughable lines of dialogue, like they are here, than just boring and generic like in the last movie. So for me personally, this movie was way more entertaining because of that. It's not good, clever, or witty dialogue by any means. It's stupid and dumb, but that's what makes me laugh. I'll take that over falling asleep any day. Now let me get into what I liked. First off, I think it's cool how they tied the Transformers into the Legend of King Arthur. Having Merlin's magic just be the Transformers tech was pretty neat, and the robot fights were pretty sweet. And like I already said, I've never been so happy to have shitty, cringe dialogue in a movie before. Without it, everything feels too generic. You gotta have weird ass dialogue to make these movies entertaining, otherwise it's too boring. And when this movie is mindless action, I'm having a pretty good time. But of course, there is a lot of stuff here that makes it a bit annoying to sit through. For starters, the storyline with Optimus Prime meeting his creator is pretty underwhelming. You only see it in the beginning, and then again at the end. And I think following Optimus Prime should have been the main focus, but he's kind of pushed to the background while the history of King Arthur and the mystery of Unicron takes center stage, as well as Mark Wahlberg being the chosen one, and this chick being the descendant of Merlin. Also, you got this little girl here, and I don't know why she needs to be in this movie. She's not necessary and doesn't do anything, but she's here, eating up the runtime. Also, they have Megatron popping in every so often to do stuff, and he isn't really involved as I thought he would be. He's literally in a few scenes at the halfway point in the movie, and then again at the end. It's like they resurrected him in the last movie just to have him do nothing in this one. Oh, also, there's this little thing that I think is hilarious, because I don't know why it happens. So this movie constantly changes aspect ratios throughout the whole movie. It's so weird. First it'll be widescreen, then it gets to a bigger aspect ratio, then back to widescreen again. It just bounces back and forth like that within the same scene. It's like one shot will be CinemaScope, then it'll fill the whole screen, then it'll cut back to a CinemaScope again. It's so absurd and hilarious. Also, there are some tone issues here, which brought me much amusement. It was funny seeing it trying to be super serious, and then it randomly injects some weird off-the-wall comment, then bounces back to being serious again. Not gonna lie, it kinda caught me off guard. But hell, I was all for it. Shit like that is why I like these movies. The absurdity and randomness. On the plus side, we got two returning characters from the LaBeouf trilogy, Lennox and Simmons. Lennox is basically working with the government to track down the Transformers, and Simmons is just here to give information about Unicron, and he isn't in the movie long. He's also not very zany or weird as he was before, but I enjoyed seeing him because the dude's hilarious. We also get to see a picture of Shia LaBeouf, and I thought that was pretty nice. So I enjoyed this one way more than Age of Extinction. I prefer it when these movies are being dumb and mindless. I like when they're goofy and weird and stupid, because that's when they're so bad they're good. And I'd rather them have me laugh than put me to sleep. That's my thoughts on all 5 of Michael Bay's Transformers movies. But before I get into my conclusion and ranking, I'm going to talk about Bumblebee, the prequel slash spin-off starring one of the more popular Autobots. Released in 2018, about a year and a half after The Last Night, Bumblebee is a spin-off slash prequel starring a fan-favorite character, Bumblebee. Taking place in 1987, we see the fall of Cybertron as the Autobots abandon their planet and Bee is sent to Earth. After losing his memory and his voice, he meets up with a girl named Charlie, who fixes him. And they form a bond as 2 Decepticons and the US government, led by John Cena, are looking for him. Now what I like about the story is that it's simple and easy to follow. It's to the point there isn't any unnecessary filler. It's a fairly simple but fun story. Now I like Michael Bay's Transformers because they're so ridiculous and mindless that they actually starts becoming really entertaining. But with Bumblebee, it's actually pretty good, like legitimately. It's not weird, awkward, goofy, or cringe, and basically it's so bad it's good. This one is just straight up good because it's fun, pretty straightforward, and it's well made. I'm not gonna lie, it's weird seeing a Transformers movie that doesn't have the crazy, excessive fireworks type of explosions that Michael Bay movies have, or the super slow-mo and low-angle shots or shaky cam. It's pretty weird, but I don't mind the change at all. The main character is pretty likable, and since Bee lost his memory and can't speak, he's kind of like a giant scared puppy. He acts a bit like a child, and it's pretty heartwarming watching him learn new things and interact with Charlie. Also, John Cena's character, Agent Burns, isn't bad. When he's being funny, I think he's great, because John Cena has some really good delivery and timing, so that's why I think he does comedy pretty well. And when he's being serious, I think he's just okay. Also, the humor here is pretty solid. There's no crude or sexual humor, it's really just a series of funny gags and interactions with Bee, and it works very well. I also really like the new designs of the Transformers. They're pretty slick and less busy, and look more like the cartoon counterparts. Also, since there's no shaky cam or super close-up shots, you can see everything happening on screen pretty well, meaning that the action is fun and easy to follow, and it never really gets to the point where it's over the top and excessive with its destruction and explosions. And since the movie takes place in the 80s, it uses music from that era, so it's good. Now, I'm not certain if this is a prequel to the Bay Transformers movies, because in The Last Night it's established that Bee was in World War II, but in this movie he doesn't arrive on Earth until 1987, so already that's not lining up. But yet in this movie you see a younger version of Simmons, which is a character from the Bay Transformers, but also at the end of this movie he turns into the yellow Camaro from the first Shia LaBeouf movie. So I don't really know what's going on here. I take it this is supposed to be like a start of a new universe or continuity, movie, but I guess we'll find out whenever they make a sequel. But in the end, I really like this movie, and I don't have anything to complain about. It's a straightforward, fun movie with a likable lead that tells a fun, heartfelt story. If you've never seen it because you don't like the Michael Bay Transformers films, I say give this one a shot. It's completely different. I think the director Travis Knight and the writer Christina Hodson did a pretty good job. So yeah, Bumblebee is a good movie. So yeah, I like Michael Bay's Transformers movies, but I want to mention that just because I find amusement and entertainment in them, I don't think they're great deep movies, and they have a lot of issues. And I really think the biggest thing that plagues these movies is that they try to tell a complex story by showing different perspectives, and having several subplots and trying to tie them all together. It's like they'll follow the military for a portion, then the protagonist, then the Transformers, and just keep bouncing around until these subplots eventually meet. But what ends up happening is that it causes them to feel convoluted and all over the place, when they really could have just made the story simpler. Also, they're filled with so much small shit like the dumb, awkward humor, and they could cut a lot of it out and shorten the runtime. If these movies weren't 2.5 hours long, then they could be more bearable to sit through. Like, look at Godzilla vs. Kong. It's a movie, it's less than 2 hours long, with a very simple story, but it's a lot of fun. Although I guess looking at it, the bloated, convoluted stories is just another thing that makes these movies so ridiculous. I find the Michael Bay-isms entertaining, and when the action is happening, I think it's a blast. So, with all that out of the way, it's time to rank them, from the one I enjoyed the least to the one I enjoyed the most. Coming in at dead last is Age of Extinction. I found this one mostly boring, with some really generic characters. I thought it was an interesting direction to take the story, but not the best execution. Surprisingly, the only Transformers film where I actually started to feel the bloated runtime. Next is The Last Knight. Definitely better than Age of Extinction. I was really happy they brought back the weird dumb humor and the terrible dialogue. By default, that made things way more entertaining. Although I found the Optimus Prime story to be really underwhelming and very disappointing. So better than Age of Extinction, I give it that. Next is Revenge of the Fallen. This one basically doubled down on all the shit that people didn't like from the first Transformers film. It made every character just infinitely more annoying. So many dumb jokes, so much character banter, so much shit that just could have been cut out to save on the runtime because this movie is long for no reason. And I get why people think it's the worst one, but I still rather watch this one over Age of Extinction and The Last Knight. Then we got Transformers. It was a blast watching this movie. Definitely had a lot of fun with it. Honestly, I just really enjoyed this one. I really don't have much more to say. I like it. And then finally there is Dark of the Moon. This one has to be my favorite just because the second half of the movie is just so damn fun. And there are parts in the first half that I really do enjoy, even though there are a lot of things that I don't. This one to me just felt very epic. It felt like a conclusion at the end. It's personally my favorite Transformers movie. And that's how I would rank the Michael Bay Transformers films. Now if you include Bumblebee, I would put it at number 2 right under Dark of the Moon. Although I will say Bumblebee is probably a better movie overall in terms of quality, but I just really like Dark of the Moon. And recently I put out a poll asking you guys which was the best Transformers movie. And 66% of you said the first one, with Dark of the Moon following after that with 22%, then Revenge of the Fallen, then Age of Extinction, and then The Last Knight. Honestly, I'm not too surprised by those results. That's about what I expected. And several people left comments saying that Bumblebee was actually the best Transformers film. And I definitely understand if someone feels that way. Oh, and for those of you worried about my brain cells from watching all these films, you don't have to worry for 2 reasons. 1, I don't have many of them left anyway. And 2, I recently got the Alfred Hitchcock collection, so for every Transformers movie I watched, I cleansed myself with 2 Hitchcock films. But anyway guys, that's the video. Hope you enjoyed. If you did, go and drop a like on it. And leave a comment, let me know what do you think about Michael Bay's Transformers films. Are they just dumb, mindless popcorn flicks to you? Do you enjoy them? Do you hate them? Leave a comment, let me know. And if you enjoyed the video, go and leave a like on it. Thanks for watching. I'll catch you next time.